In the last video on the channel, we took a look at how to install an SSD into the fat model of PlayStation 2 and run OPL, the Open PS2 Loader software on it. Now I'll show you how to transform OPL on your PlayStation 2 by being able to add in box art, spine art, disc art, and even the metadata for your favorite games right in the OPL interface. So grab that PS2 with your hard drive or SSD and fire up your PC because we're about to level up your PS2 setup. To get started, you'll need a FreeMake Boot memory card. You can think of FreeMake Boot as a replacement user interface for your PlayStation 2. It's an 8MB memory card. This 8MB FreeMake Boot card from 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐎 does the trick. We're going to be using an SSD installed in the fat model of the PlayStation 2 to run OPL, and this adapter board from 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿ABS makes that possible. The top of this board has a male port on it that you connect to the PlayStation 2's hard drive interface, and on the bottom, there's a SATA port for connecting the SSD drive to the board. Naturally, you're going to need a solid-state drive. In this case, I'm using a PNY 1TB drive. It's a fast and reliable SATA SSD drive, and you can store a ton of PlayStation 2 games on it. To transfer content from the OPL Manager to your SSD, you'll need a dock like this. This connects a SATA hard drive over USB 3.0 to your computer. You can connect 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch drives. On the back of the unit, there's a USB-B style connection, a power button, and a barrel jack connection for connecting power from the wall. One of the really cool things about a dock like this is you can also clone drives with it by inserting the source and target drives and just pressing the clone button. It's like magic. The hard drive bay on the PlayStation 2 is a 3.5-inch drive bay, and the SSD is a 2.5-inch drive. That's where this adapter comes in. The adapter lets you insert the 2.5-inch drive into the 3.5-inch adapter and then screw it down into place to secure it. This way the smaller SSD fits properly in the larger size bay in the PlayStation 2. I have links in this video's description to all of these parts that you'll need to get things up and running on your fat model PS2. I also have the video guide for the original SSD setup linked for you in this video's description. In the first video where you learned how to set up the SSD for your PlayStation 2, I included a version of OPL Manager in that original download. So this same download page for setting up the SSD also has the download file for OPL Manager and some additional content inside that folder that you'll need. To grab that same file, all you've got to do is go to the green download button and click on it to download that zip file to your computer. To get to OPL Manager to launch it for the first time, you'll need to extract the zip file. Right-click on File Explorer and open up the Downloads folder on your computer. You'll see a zip file here, and all you need to do with it is right-click on it and select Extract All. At the window that appears, come down to the bottom and click on Extract. Then when the extract process is complete, right-click on the zip file and select Delete to send it to the recycle bin. And remember, it's backed up there just in case you need it later. Okay, let's launch OPL Manager for the first time. Double-click into the newly extracted folder. There's a subfolder in there with the same name, double-click into it. You'll find the OPL subfolder right here. I knew I was going to create this OPL Manager video guide when I created the guide on installing the SSD in the first place, so that's why it was here. Go ahead and double-click into the OPL Manager folder. There's no need to click on anything inside this folder yet. Instead, I'm going to take this File Explorer window and drag and drop it over to the left side of the screen and snap it into place here. This will give us a chance to connect and identify the SSD drive letter for the next step. Since this guide is largely a continuation of the original SSD setup, I'm going to go ahead and just start from the point that the SSD is already installed into the adapter, insert it into the dock, power on the dock, and connect the USB cable to the computer. Once the USB dock is recognized by Windows, you'll see a File Explorer window appear. There are already pre-existing folders here, one that says CD and one that says DVD. In this case, I've copied over some DVD-based PlayStation 2 game content in .iso format from the previous video. I left these folders on here because I want to illustrate something about OPL Manager when it starts to create folders on the root of your SSD in just a moment. It's worth taking a moment to identify the drive letter of your SSD for the following steps. In this case, it's drive letter J, and it's named subscribe, so you don't forget to subscribe to the channel while you're here. I've got more great PS2 content right around the corner, and you don't want to miss it. Okay, now that we know what drive letter Windows is assigned to the attached SSD, you can close out that File Explorer window and just maximize the other one. To launch the OPL Manager application for the first time, double-click on this icon. It's the .exe file shown here. If you see this confirmation message appear on screen, come up to More Info and left-click on it. Then at the bottom right, you can click on Run Anyway to start the application. Okay, there's some important things to note about OPL Manager before you proceed. The first one is, depending upon the resolution and scale of your Windows display, you might not see very much of it on screen, like you see here. Another problem you might face is most modern OLED displays use some form of OLED care in the form of automatic brightness leveling. So if you change your Windows scale and resolution to be able to open the OPL window in its entirety, you might end up seeing this. If you're one of the 70% of people that watch this content on an OLED display, you might have already seen the window get washed out. But if you're not, here's what that effect looks like. It can be really hard to use applications like OPL that are based on exclusively white backgrounds and have no dark mode. Here's a workaround for that. First, change your display resolution to about 1920 by 1080 and the scale to about 150%. Then press the following on your keyboard: left Alt, left Shift, and the print screen key. This activates what's called high contrast mode. If you've opened OPL Manager and your Windows computer is connected to an OLED display, it just thanked you for this. You don't have to use high contrast mode, but it's a nice option to have if you need it. And man, oh man, did the change in scale and resolution for Windows really turn that halo around the mouse pointer to something crazy looking. Okay, inside OPL Manager, the first thing you'll be prompted to do is select your language. In this case, it's defaulted to English, which is the language for this video. Once you have the language selected, click on Save to go to the next step. You'll be prompted to decide whether or not you want to allow automatic updates. I think it's a good idea. That option is automatically checked for yes by default. Just come down to Save and click on Save to go to the next step. In this third screen here, you'll need to tell OPL Manager where you want to create OPL folders. In this case, we're going to create them right on the root of the SSD. You'll need to change the default path inside OPL Manager to the root of your SSD drive. To do this, come down to the box that says Browse right here and click on it. Remember, earlier in the video, we identified the SSD as drive letter J called Subscribe. Whatever your drive's name and letter is, double-click on it. Then when you're inside it at the root of the drive, come down to Select Folder at the bottom right corner of this pop-out window and click on it to lock in this change. Once you have the drive path selected, come down to Save at the bottom and click on it to go to the next step. Whether they're there or not, you'll see a pop-up that says no CD, DVD, or art folders have been found. No matter whether you have them or don't, you're going to see this pop-up message. This is an expected behavior. Remember, I already have a CD and DVD folder on the SSD with games in it. Once you click on OK, it will go ahead and create the CD and DVD folders for you, and it will not overwrite the folders if you already have them there with your games in it. Next up, you'll be asked if you need to create an art folder, and yes you do, because we're going to put art for each of the games that are installed on your SSD. So click on Yes to create the art folder on your SSD. You're going to see a pop-up message that tells you that there are invalid game file names and that it needs to be corrected. It's also going to tell you it's going to open an invalid tab. We'll fix these in the next step. Just click on OK to continue. Now you'll be at the main menu of the OPL Manager and the Invalid tab. Invalid doesn't mean that the games themselves are invalid, only the file names and the way in which OPL Manager will search for the artwork files to associate with them. Fortunately, OPL Manager makes this very easy to fix. Here's how it's done. The list of all of the games that OPL Manager has recognized will be on the left side of the screen. Select one of the games that you want to update the art for. Just double-click on the game and you'll see that a new side tab will populate, and it has some basic information about the game and some options that you can configure. One of the great things about OPL Manager is that it can pull the data that you need right from the internet. Click on Get Title from DB, and it will generate a title that it needs in order to try to identify the game for future artwork downloads. Once it's grabbed an updated title name from the title database, you'll need to see if it can change your file name for your game so that the artwork will match the file name and be recognized inside OPL once you load it on your PS2. Next, click on Try Update File Name. This is going to attempt to change the file name that is invalid for OPL artwork purposes and change it to one that is. The proposed change will be shown in a pop-up window. All you've got to do is click on the Yes button here to continue. Once the file name's been updated, the game's going to be moved from the Invalid tab to the Home tab in OPL Manager. One down and dozens to go. Repeat this process to rename all of your files from their original file name to the ones that are properly recognized by OPL Manager. Once all of the file names are set correctly, the Invalid tab will disappear and you'll be taken to the Home tab. Now that the files are properly named, let's grab some artwork. Come up to Batch Actions in the menu in the top and click on it. The first listing says Art Download. Scroll down to it and left-click on it. This opens a new pop-up window that lets you make choices about what types of artwork you'd like to download for the games in your library. Take a look at the menu on the right side of the screen. There are options here that you can check or uncheck for downloading each type of artwork that you want for the games in your PS2 library. For this example, I'm going to put a check mark next to each of the artwork types so that we can download every piece of potential artwork for each of the games stored on the PS2's SSD drive. I'm even going to go back and put a check mark next to the one I missed. Let me know in the comments if it was driving you crazy until I went back and fixed it. Once you've put a check mark next to your selections, click on the Start button to start downloading the artwork to your SSD. Okay, so downloading multiple artwork files across nearly 4 dozen PS2 games isn't the fastest thing. I've sped this up on the video because watching artwork files download is about as exciting as watching paint dry. Once the artwork files are completely downloaded, you'll see a confirmation message pop up in the middle of the screen. Click on OK to close out the pop-up message. You're now done with the artwork downloader. Click the red X in the top right corner to close it out. This won't close out the OPL Manager, just the artwork downloader. What's really great about OPL Manager is you'll get instant feedback to know whether or not the artwork downloads were successful, and in this case, they absolutely were. If you click on individual games, you'll see their artwork represented on the right side of the screen. By the way, the artwork was downloaded to the Art subfolder right on the root of the SSD. You're done with the OPL Manager. You can right-click on the X in the top right corner to close it out to get back to your Windows desktop. Oh yeah, there is one more thing. Don't forget to change back your resolution and scale and turn off the high contrast mode if you happen to utilize these things. There, all set. Remember how I showed you at the beginning of the video OPL can show you metadata for your games? Here's how you can add that into OPL. We're going to go back into the downloaded all-in-one folder so that you can get some configuration files that OPL needs to show the metadata. Open up File Explorer and then go back to the Downloads folder. Double-click into the AIO folder that you previously downloaded and into its subfolder. You'll find that OPL Manager folder here again. Double-click into the OPL Manager folder. Inside the OPL Manager subfolder, you'll find another subfolder which has OPL configuration files. I downloaded these from the GitHub repository so that you could have direct access to them in the all-in-one file. Double-click into this subfolder and you'll find, well, more subfolders. What you're looking for here is that there are 2 different languages supported for the metadata. The first one is for English and the second one's for French. In this case, since this is an English video, I'm going to navigate to the folder that says CFG and has EN on it for English, and then double-click into this folder. There are literally thousands of configuration files here ready to go. I'm going to take this window and then drag and drop it over on the left side of the screen, snapped into place here. All of these configuration files need to be copied and pasted over to the CFG folder at the root of your solid-state drive. So I'm going to open up a new instance of File Explorer here, and then I'll bring this File Explorer window over to the right side of the screen, drag and drop it, and snap it into place. Remember that the solid-state drive in this example is drive letter J and it's called subscribe. So locate the drive letter that matches your drive and double-click on it. On the root of the drive, you'll find a folder here called CFG. Double-click into that folder, and that is where you're going to copy over all of the configuration files from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. So for this, I'll come over to the left side of the screen, which is in that English configuration folder, click into it, select the first file, and then press Ctrl-A to select everything inside the folder. I'll right-click on all of the highlighted files and then select Copy from the list of choices. Then I'll come over to the right side to the File Explorer window that represents the CFG folder that's on the solid-state drive, right-click, and select Paste to copy in the thousands of CFG files into this folder. Once everything's copied over, you can close out any open instances of File Explorer by left-clicking the red X in the top right corner of the Windows to get back to your Windows desktop. That's everything you've got to do with your computer. You can transition back over to your PlayStation 2 for the rest of this video guide. Remove the SSD from the USB dock, put it in the adapter, and reinsert it back into your PlayStation 2. For all of these changes to take effect in OPL, you'll need to delete the configuration folder for OPL off the memory card. Come down to ULaunch ELF and launch it. Remember that in 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐎𝐒𝐒𝐿, circle goes forward and triangle goes back. Press the circle button to access the storage locations in your PS2. Your memory card will be identified either by MC0 left slot or MC1 right slot. In this case, I have the memory card, the FreeMake boot card, at MC0, which is the left slot, so I'll select it with the circle button. The OPL configuration folder is located here. Use the D-pad to scroll the red highlight down until you get to the listing that says OPL. From here, you'll need to pull out the side cart menu to access the delete function. Press the right one button or the right shoulder button on the PS2 controller to pull out the side cart menu. Use the D-pad to move the triangle highlight down until you get to the listing for delete. Select delete with the circle button and you'll see a pop-up confirmation message appear in the middle of the screen. To confirm the deletion of the OPL folder, press the circle button for OK. This won't delete OPL from your memory card, only its configuration settings, which we're going to update in just a moment. You're done with 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 at this point. Turn off your PS2 and then turn it right back on. Back at the main menu of FreeMake Boot, come down to the listing for Open PS2 Loader and select it with the X button to launch it. Just like with the initial setup, we'll need to tell OPL how to boot your solid-state drive. Select Settings from the menu. It's the first listing at the top. There are two settings here that you need to change from off to auto for OPL to recognize your exFAT SSD. Scroll down with the D-pad until you get to the first listing, which says BDM Start Mode. It's set to off by default. Press the X button and then press down on the D-pad several times until you change this setting from off to auto. Press X to lock in the change. Next up, scroll down until you get to the listing that says HDD Device Start Mode. Once again, press the X button to select it, push down several times until you get to auto, and press the X button to lock in that change as well. In order for the changes to be saved, you'll need to come all the way down to the bottom of the screen to the bottom left corner. There's an OK button tucked away down there. Move the highlight down to OK with the D-pad and press X to save the changes. In order for OPL to be able to show you the artwork, you need to turn on that setting. Come down one listing from the main menu here to the listing that says Display Settings and press the X button to access the menu. Take a look at the top list of choices here. There's a toggle option here for a listing called Cover Art. Come down to it with the D-pad and then press the X button. This will toggle this setting from off to on so that you can display cover art on the main menu interface of OPL. Just like before, there's an OK button in the bottom left corner. Come down to it with the D-pad and select OK with the X button to lock in these changes. Your changes are locked in, but they're not written to the memory card yet. Scroll down through the list of choices until you get to the listing that says Save Changes. Select it with the X button. Give your PlayStation 2 a moment to get the hamster turning in the wheel, and the changes will be written to your memory card and saved. This way, every time you boot your PlayStation 2, OPL will know to boot from the solid-state drive and how to access the new data that you've installed to it. At the Save Confirmation screen, press the circle button to go back. Alright, you've put in the work, it's time for the reward. Press the circle button again, and all of the artwork that you've copied over to OPL and your SSD will now be displayed in the interface. To take a look at the metadata, or things like the genre, release date, and other information for a game, press the square button for more info. These upgrades to the art assets and the configuration files inside OPL really put a lot of polish and shine on what continues to be a great option for playing backups of your favorite PS2 games on your fat model PS2. By the way, did you know that you can do a whole lot more with your modded PlayStation 2 than just play backups of PS2 games with it? Check out this video on screen and in the description and pinned comment to find out how to play even more of your favorite retro game content on your modded PlayStation 2. I'll see you over there.